Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Well, we did it. We're here. After 5 minutes, we've made it through the intro. That's one of my favorite things because, you never know when the show's going to go. And I think that's a crazy thing. We're like the trains before Mussolini. We're just, whenever we feel like rolling, we roll through. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 1. What do these time zones even mean? Like which time we're in? But I just want to introduce right now, Martin. Where are you? Are you in Deutschland or are
In
you in
Germany, yes,
Österreich?
in
Okay.
Germany, in
All right.
Lower Franconia.
All right. So and then Raf, are you in Austria?
Indeed, I'm in
So
Vienna.
we're in the trifecta of Sorosian states right now. I'm in the United States, and so this is crazy. Like Klaus Schwab is even jealous that we're in these 3 places at once. It's insane. So
Germany,
I mean,
the colony of America, Austria, the colony of Germany, so.
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like it's really Russian dolls, at the end of the day. But I'd like to introduce, and you guys remember Raph from before. Has Team Rabbit Hole, one of our favorite people in the world. Martin, though, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Alrighty, yes. Martin is my name, obviously. I actually have been to the United States for quite a while. Let's start at the beginning. After school, actually, I joined the German army for about 12 years. So I know a little bit what true military is. We don't have one anymore. But after the military, I actually went to the States. I lived in Kentucky for a while. Tried all kinds of stuff, from washing dishes up to a millionaire, but I stopped somewhere in between, so didn't quite make it. But anyway, I
American dream.
The American dream, exactly. I sold cars, I sold mortgages, I even sold restaurant coupons from door to door for a while. But then I ended up to be I was with Amazon for a while, and then I joined a big German company in the United States, and they sent me back over home. And this is where I'm still working. I'm in quality management actually today.
Man,
And
and so you know about Tartaria as well, so that's something important in Europe. I mean, how big is it known, the Tartaria thing? Do you know any people that have heard about it?
it's getting there. When I first ran across it and I first did a presentation about it, there was actually, like, I would say there were 60 people listening. About 30 of them had heard of it, but
Wow.
of course that was already, Bachheimer Club. There was a couple of people that already woken up a little bit. So it's not very much known, but it's picking up speed tremendously.
So how did you find out about it? Where did you first hear?
So I always was a history freak, and I liked history at school already. And I read one book. It's actually called the Fake Medieval Times. And in that book, there is pretty much proven that Charles the Great, the father of Europe, that he basically never existed, and they proved it by many different aspects. And somewhere in that research, I stumbled across Mudflat and Tartaria, and then it took off for me, And I really wanted to have I wanted to see something with my own eyes, not just the internet stuff. And I actually traveled up to Münster, and in Münster is an astrological clock from 1540s, and that actually has a world map on it, and it has Tartaria written on it.
Right.
And I saw that and like, okay, there must be something to that, and then I started the deep dive.
So you've done some presentations. Do you have something you can share a bit? And like, also, I'm curious that, about Germany specifically, if you found things, but wherever you want to start, however you want to get into stuff.
Oh, definitely. We could actually let's just start with my first presentation that I ever had. So they are in German, of course, but I will talk to them, so it shouldn't be any problem. So let's see real quick. Folien, my computer. How do I pick Teilen? Just the screen. Okay, that will be the easiest. And then let's just go into. This is the first one, I believe. Yes. So I hope you can see that, because I cannot see you guys now because I have only one screen. Can you see that now?
Not yet. Are you doing have you pushed the share button on the Zoom?
I thought I did.
StreamYard?
Let's see. I thought I did. So let's see.
Maybe there's like a permissions thing.
Bildschirm teilen.
Also, if it's online, I can pull it up if there's some kind of if it's locked out. I don't know. I see a share screen and then you push share screen, and it should go to window. And you can select it.
Thailand. So let's see. So
It's also all in German, so it's like hard to check support when I don't know
yeah, Bildschirm Thailand. So it says that I'm sharing StreamYard. Oh, wait a minute, just a second.
accept. You probably have to accept permissions or something.
Here we go. Here we go. The Ukraine war. Accept.
There we go.
Now.
Okay. See,
Perfect.
there's the option. Boom.
Perfect. Yeah. The fault is
Ukraine Krieg.
Exactly.
It's
so
cool, like, you know, French words of like perfume, we know that, but German words like Krieg, that's what we get. Those are the words that translate over. Like everyone's heard Blitzkrieg, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy,
Superhero,
isn't it?
it's the villain in Superman.
And
Exactly.
Angst. And some others.
And the subtitle actually was that the Ukrainian war, and that is my theory, and it's probably true, is the logical continuation of a age-old conflict, you know, several hundreds of years. And so the first thing I looked at is actually the Ukraine area, what was there before, and that was actually the Empire of Khazaria. They tell us at around 850 after Christ. But of course, you never know, you know, because they put so many fake years in there that you never really know. But that's what used to be there. This is Ukraine as it is today, and you can already see. I mean, obviously, Ukraine did not even exist up to 1917. Then Stalin actually made it one of the Soviet republics after the Russian Revolution, obviously. And after World War II, there was actually a couple more pieces added to it. So here's a small piece from Hungary. There are some pieces from Romania. Then the Crimea, of course, where this conflict started a couple of years ago, if you will. And the green part is the old Ukrainian territory. So you already see that this is already a time bomb that was set back in 1908, after World War II, when they put this together. And back then it didn't matter because it was part of the Soviet Union. But once the Soviet Union broke apart and it became its own country, so now obviously you have many different peoples in there, and it's a time bomb. It's really a time bomb. And
Right.
the deep state is using that as we currently experience.
So have you looked at any etymological roots for the word Ukraine? Like some people have tied it to cranium, and there's some other Slavic things having to do with blossoming and flower. Do you have any thoughts on the name Ukraine?
I have not done that yet, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm wondering a lot about some of the weird ones, you know, like Danger Rus. Like we have in the Americanization of like the Danes, the Deutsch, and you know the Romanovs. You know, also like the fact that we've got the Czars to Caesar. You know, there's a lot of connections in linguistics.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Definitely look that up. It will be interesting. Yeah. Then I want to get real quick. Most of you guys know the heartland theory, so because that's actually what George Friedman actually said. The main goal of England and the United States has always been to keep Germany and Russia apart, for a simple reason, because you don't want German knowledge, German expertise, German engineers. You don't want them to work together with Russian oil, Russian iron, and of course the Russian workforce. You know, so German capital and intelligence together with Russian workforce and
Slavic
Russian
cunning, yes.
resources. Yeah, you don't want that. And for exactly for that reason, after World War II, this belt of states here was created. That is up to this day, actually, the main reason why you want that is simply to keep Russia and Germany apart. And the best thing obviously you can do to keep them apart is to send them against each other in 2 world wars, because then they're decimating each other and are less likely to come together. And actually, Mackinder created the Heartland theory back in 1904, and that because the most important area you need to control in Europe is actually the area between the Eastern Sea, Ostsee, where Poland is today, and the Black Sea, because right here. You have mountainous area down here, and this here is basically flat land where you see this red arrow. So if you control this flat land, you march from Berlin to Moscow, and there is, except of rivers, nothing is stopping you. There is no mountain range or anything like that, and vice versa, of course. So if you control this yellow part of Eurasia, you can defend Western Europe against the bad Russians or the Mongols or whoever is coming from the east, and vice versa. If you hold that as a Russian, you can defend against France, Germany, and everything that happens in Western Europe. And this is why this is the key area of the biggest landmass on the world. So this is actually NATO and Warsaw Pact. We all know that. So the states that were red were in the Warsaw Pact, and then you have Russia over here. And then after Germany reunited in 1990, of course, James Baker actually promised Gorbachev that NATO would not expand by 1 inch to the east. And we all know everything that is red today is NATO. So that is much more than an inch, if you think of that. And now they are actually setting fire to Ukraine. And if you put yourself in Putin's shoes, obviously you cannot give up Ukraine, because from Ukraine you march straight up into Moscow. There is nothing stopping you there. There is no mountains. There is no nothing. So he cannot, never ever allow Ukraine being in NATO. And he actually looked at all this happening, Gorbachev and Yeltsin and all the other Russian presidents, but obviously Putin cannot allow this to happen here. So one thing that I did is I actually stepped back in time, and I looked at, because one theory that I'm having here is what we're seeing here is actually land powers fighting against sea powers. And I looked at who are classical land powers in history. And that was the Roman Empire. That's, of course, Russia, China, Austria, Hungary, then France, and the German Empire. That is classical land powers. They have some access to the oceans, but they never really had a big navy, except for Germany was actually the runner-up to the British Navy in World War I, which was one reason for World War I, because the British obviously could not allow that to happen. And then let's look at sea powers, and that actually goes all the way back to the Phoenicians. They come from what's today Lebanon, and they basically went through the whole Mediterranean. They founded Carthago. They are the founders of the later Italian sea power, Spanish sea power. Some even talk about the Irish, that they are connected to the Phoenicians. Then we talk about Greece, Italy, as I already said, Portugal and Spain at one time divided the whole world amongst each other. The Pope actually did that. He said, this is the part for Spain where they can steal all the gold. This is the part for Portugal where they can steal all the gold. Then, of course, you have Great Britain after they defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588. You have the Netherlands, you have Japan, and then, of course, the United States, which is up to this day the largest sea power. And the sea power of the United States is the one thing that still guarantees them their world power status. But land power, they're not the strongest land power anymore, in my opinion. So this is actually just real quick. I go through these real quick. This is where the Phoenicians came from. As I already mentioned, they colonized the whole Mediterranean, Sardinia, Sicily, Carthago, all the way to Gibraltar. This is where the Phoenicians actually came from. This is when the Italians had the big sea power. There was basically Venice was the most important one. There was also Amalfi, Gaeta, Pisa, so several Italian cities that had big navies, and it's no coincidence that the so-called discoverer of America was Christopher Columbus. He was actually Italian. He was on Spanish ships, but he was Italian. And that's
well,
yeah.
I gotta just say, technically, he was from Dubrovnik, so he could have been Italian by blood. It's plausible. It's very close, but he would have been Croatian. I just love that the Romans love to just take everybody. Like, we're all Romans. Like, I don't know, are we?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. There's two more actually that were Italian. So Giovanni Caboto was Italian, and Amerigo Vespucci. And America is actually named after Amerigo. So he was an Italian too. is something that's not too many people actually know that Italy was a true sea power at one time.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually the division of the Pope that I mentioned. So everything that is white here was for Portugal. So that's why Portugal was so strong in Asia and Africa, versus Spain obviously was very strong in the Americas, and also parts of Indonesia, Australia, Japan. So you might have seen Shogun. So this is actually the Portuguese and the Spanish. I'm not quite sure. That are stealing there. Here you see it again. So everything that's pink is the Spanish, and everything that's green is the Portuguese. Then 1588, I already mentioned it, the Spanish Armada sailed against England, and the storm and the British Navy, the storm helped big time. So 1588, England is actually taking over as the major sea power. Napoleon tried to fight against them once, 1805, the Battle of Trafalgar. Lord Nelson, very famous. Lord Nelson actually died, but the British Navy won against the Spanish and French. They actually tried to take over sea power again, but they failed. And Britain then, in the following couple of years, actually built a true world empire. Everything that's red is Britain, and then British colonies, obviously. That was the biggest up to that point. Let's just look at some ships just real quick. 1914, when World War I broke out. So Great Britain had 20 battleships. Germany at the time had 15, and this is actually why Britain had to fight the Germans, because they were the runner-ups, and they would have probably closed up to Britain, which they could have never afford. The United States was about half of the British Navy back in the day, but after World War I, the United States is rising up very, very quickly, of course. I'm just going through there. This is actually today. So everything that's blue is either the United States or people in NATO, or countries where the United States have a military presence. And you see, this is truly the whole world besides China and Russia. The green ones actually are countries where Russia has military, and that's really only Vietnam. I believe this is Kyrgyzstan. This should be Georgia. And this is Transnistrian, I believe. So really, really small. And you see that NATO and the United States is really choking Russia. And here we have Ukraine. And this is exactly why we have the war there right now. So I'm going through there real quick. This is actually very, very interesting, because I never knew that this organization actually existed. There is in 2001, there was the foundation of the so-called Shanghai Organization for Working Together. And back in the day, it was Russia, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. These 5 countries actually started to go together. Uzbekistan joined. In the meantime, even India and Pakistan joined. So now you're looking at an organization that even is recognized by the UN. They have a so-called observer status at the UN, and they represent 40% of the people living on this planet. You know, because you have China and India, of course, are the biggest countries that have the most population in the world. So you're talking about 40% of the people. And this is actually something, I hope that comes across when I show you that now. Let's put an old map here.
Wow.
And here now we have Tartaria. And look at what's pink here. I will go back and forth a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is close to identical.
Turan, yeah, the Turanian, Persia, and in Russia, like the entire,
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
Turanian state, yeah.
So the only thing that's truly missing at this point is Turkey and Saudi Arabia, but all the other countries that are Tartaria here have at least observer status in this new organization.
Right.
And that is tremendous. So what I think, my theory is what we're seeing here, and what is happening actually also in Ukraine and will be happening in Taiwan and other countries also, is a comeback of the land powers, a comeback of Tartaria. And looking at these two maps, it's actually pretty wild. When I saw that, it's
Wow,
pretty
yeah.
wild how it looks like.
So I mean, you've seen you've seen the parity of the dollar to the euro right now. Are you
Yes.
what do you see that as meaning? Like, is Europe becoming a country in and of itself, or is Europe the United States because they're all economically tied? Are they becoming the antithesis, the Atlantean antithesis of Tartaria, and that's a completely separate world power? I mean,
Well, they're trying to be. I think the dollar and the euro will crash pretty much parallel. So the dollar is catching up against the euro right now. For instance, these gas deals and everything. So
right.
the United States can take big advantage, especially with that gas stuff, just as an example. But that might prolong the dollar for a little bit. But I'm pretty sure that the whole Western currencies, the whole Western economy will crash. And we'll see how fast it happens. I don't think it will go much further than the next year, and then
Wow.
it will crash. And the thing is, and we can actually see that with all these sanctions that they put against Russia at this point, it is hurting Europe much more than it's hurting Russia. Because one thing that I read today is actually that the West is starting to get really mad because there is a big deal between Putin and Erdogan in Turkey. They just signed a big gas deal. So the gas he cannot sell to Europe because we're doing this embargo, right, and shooting ourselves in the knees because we have the cold the cold houses in wintertime, and he's selling that gas now to Turkey. And that is actually quite interesting because Turkey is part of NATO, and obviously I'm pretty sure the U.S. and England and the rest of the NATO states will try to put some pressure on Erdogan, but I don't think it will be successful.
Yeah, they're gonna need more than just Dr. Oz or whatever the magic TV doctor from Turkey is. I'm noticing on the map of Tartaria by India, there is Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is certainly Tartarian color. What do you think's going on with Sri Lanka? Is it going to leave? Is it folding out of the Western hand, or what's happening?
It feels like that, yeah. They just chased away their president, right? There was a nice little video where he's actually jumping on a ship and sailing out. So it seems like that is the first country that succeeded in overthrowing their current government. And obviously, we have other countries that are moving towards that direction. So Netherlands actually is there is big farmers protests. So that will be quite interesting. In Germany, by the way, you don't hear a single thing about that. You never ever hear anything in the mainstream news. You only hear that basically on Telegram, or the alternative channels. They act like it is not happening. It's really, really crazy. And so by that, you can tell how the deep state is still controlling our media big time.
Yeah, I mean, what is happening in Germany? I see in Holland, fires all the time. Are you guys having the same kinds of fires, like farming fires, or are there any kind of just collapse of industry or riots, protests, anything at all?
At this point, we don't really have riots. Some people say the Germans are way too nice. We have these Monday marches. We had especially during peak time of Corona, the coronavirus. We had here in Bamberg, we had thousands of people on the streets. But ever since we don't have the lockdown anymore, that actually dwindled down. So now you're talking maybe 200 or 300 every week. Germany is most of Germany is still asleep. I would say about 15 to 20% probably woke up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But we need a little bit more than that. But we don't have any riots. There are a couple of farmers close to the Netherlands border. They united a little bit with the Dutch guys. Went there by tractors and things like that. But at this point there is no violence or open resistance. Not at this point.
You've seen the things with the police shooting at farmers in Holland, right? Have you seen
Yes.
those
Mhm.
videos?
Yes.
So do you think that there's going to be like a serious I mean how realistic is that to continue, like police shooting at citizens or civilians across Europe?
Yeah, that's all speculation. We hope that it's not escalating, of course. So far, nobody got hurt, but the police, they might not shoot at the people yet. But I mean, even in Germany, the last 2 years, we have a couple of police units. They were not nice to people, and lots of people got hurt actually. And there is a specific German police units, especially a couple of units in Berlin. Um, you actually have to feel they are specifically trained to do that, you know.
Mhm.
So we'll see
Um
how that develops.
Somebody, Elron says it's not a super chat, but I'll allow it. Do you realize, please, the who? Maybe I think he's trying to say World Health Organization, or maybe he's not. Maybe he just says who made all these maps that show Tartar Jesuits. History had been taken over already when these maps were made. Tartary is a psyop to get on board for a new world order. So, what do you think about that? I mean, I know I've seen maps actually from before the 1600s, and people start to argue about the Jesuits because, of course, the Jesuits in the 1500s after, there's a big cutoff between the 12th century and the 15th century because they upset the order and started creating, uh, breaking apart Tartaria, saying, "Well, this isn't Tartaria. This group is we've gotten the Manchurians in charge of this area now. We're breaking it up." But what do you say to the Jesuit connection, and what do you say to the idea that Tartary is preparing us for the New World Order? The other
Yeah.
direction.
Um, Well, I believe that Tartaria really existed. I think they might try to misuse it. There is a danger there, but
Sure.
there is indications that Tartaria really existed, and I think architecture. If you look at architecture all across the globe, you have this what they tell us is Roman Greek architecture, and it exists in North America, it exists in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, even Australia, South America. You have it all across the globe.
Mhm.
And I don't think you can deny that there must have been this a similar technology and a similar culture behind that. So the Jesuits might try to misuse it, but I think that it was in fact there. And that was why it was so important for me, not only to go by maps, what I told you before, but I wanted to see it with my own eyes. So I went to Münster and I looked at that clock. So unless the Jesuits also faked that clock and faked all the flags and everything, I believe there is a pretty good chance that Tartary existed.
Legit. Have you so is there more is there more of this presentation?
Yeah,
Great.
I will.
Can
I
you
will.
please keep going? Yeah.
I will not go through all of it. One thing that I wanted to share with you, because that's also quite interesting, is so this is actually Europe in the year of 1812. So this was Napoleon's empire, if you will. And in 1812, he actually marched to Russia. He marched to Moscow, and there was actually something I noticed, and I also noticed that a couple of other people caught on to that also. When he marched to Russia, so here's actually Eastern Prussia. When he marched to Russia, he marched to Moscow. But back in 1812, Moscow was not the capital of Russia. Back
Mhm.
then, St. Petersburg was the capital of Russia. And I actually even went to Google Maps, and so Paris, right? That's where Napoleon started. And so I measured how far did he have to march in order to get to St. Petersburg? That's about 2,500 kilometers. And then I compared that with Moscow, and that's 2,760 kilometers. So we're talking about 150 miles more, and also at least 5 days of marching more. So why in the world would you do that? Because it always has been in the history. If you want to conquer a country, you conquer the capital, and then the war is over. So why in the world would he march to Moscow and not to St. Petersburg? And there is a theory, because back in the day, and you remember the Tartary map, back in the day, this was actually the Muscovite part of Tartaria. So Moscow could have very well been a Tartarian city, and Napoleon actually marched against Tartaria. So I personally think that that was probably the final blow against Tartaria, because Tartaria ceased to exist or broke up somewhere after 1812, somewhere in between 1812 and 1850 is my gut feeling, I would say.
Man.
So, so let's see, what else do we have? This is just several maps. We all know those, so I go through them really quickly. That's exactly what you just mentioned. They could be all fake, by the Jesuits, but they might very well be true. We already seen this one before. This is also an older one. This one is quite interesting because obviously they made the Germania out of that. But what I found interesting here is if you look at the hand, so here's Italy, right? And here's Sicily. So actually one of the insignia of the king is actually Sicily, spoofing up the Vatican, because they obviously want to push the Roman Empire. And the other one, the scepter, is actually going up to the British Islands. And I found that quite interesting because this map is supposed to be from the 1550s somewhere, and that was actually when England started to come to the world stage, right? And in 1588 they defeated the Spanish Armada and became a world power. So I think that's quite a coincidence. But what's also interesting on this map is here in the right-hand corner you see Tartaria. So
Yeah.
they made it very small, but I think they probably could not deny its existence, it's because too many people knew about it. So they wrote it on the map, but they made it very small. They already tried to make it less important, right? So here we
Although it continues off, it's beyond the map,
exactly. Then this here is a map from 1700. So here we already see some different parts of Tartaria. So here we have the Muscovite Tartaria with Moscow up here. This is the theory that Napoleon actually fought against them. Then we have the independent Tartaria, the Chinese Tartaria, Yakutia, things like that. So here was already broken up. And this is exactly what has been done throughout history, right? You have a huge country and you break it into little parts. And you might have even seen those maps. There is actually plans to break up Russia in 7 or 8 different small countries. So to break down the power and to basically do the same thing with them than they did with Tartaria back in the day. Let's see, there was one more thing that I wanted to show you, and that is the clock. This was actually the flags. Just a second, exactly. So this is from a German naval how would you say, naval dictionary, and down here you actually find the Tartarian flags. They are yellow with a black Ceylon. A Ceylon is a combination of a dragon, a lion, a snake, a couple of animals in there. Or you also have a flag that actually has an owl, also on the same color. So it is on the flag chart, a German flag chart. Here you see them in this actually is French. This must be from a French book, Emperor of Tartary. And wait a minute, I think I went over here is an English one, the flags of all nations. And so here you have China and Tartary. What I find quite interesting, that Tartary is right below the United States. So it seems to be not quite as unimportant, right, or unimportant of a country if it's right below the United States.
Right.
And then we have some literature where we find the coat of arms again of Tartary, the owl. Or here we have a French book. What is that? 1736. That is actually the emperor of the Tartary Chinoise. So it seems to have existed. And now let's go. Yeah, here's the clock. That is actually a picture from the internet. So if you see here, so you have the world map on the back of this clock face. That is actually mirrored because they actually it is like looking from below the clock. So you look through the clock, so everything is mirrored. But here you have Tartaria, And then I went up there and I wanted to see that for myself. Just a second, was it too fast again? Here, this is a picture. These are pictures that I took myself. So here's that clock again, and here you have Tartaria, clearly written on that clock face.
Wow.
If India,
And this is in where this was in where was this again?
this is in Münster. That is
Oh,
a city in northern Germany.
right.
Um,
Is that where the cheese comes from? Is it from the monastery? The monastery?
Münster, yeah, it has the same name. Yes, Münster cheese, yeah, it's the same name, and it very well might be because they have lots of cows there, and it's actually a dairy area. Yeah,
Wow.
good catch.
Monastic dairy. Okay. So then is that at a monastery or is that in the center of the town or where is this? Is it a
This is
cathedral?
actually this is the biggest church in Münster,
Yeah.
the main church in Münster. Unfortunately, I don't have the
So the
picture from
monastery in monastery. Okay, so there you go. And then they've got the clock. There you go.
Exactly. Münster is also another name. There's the Ulmer Münster, for instance. It's another name for cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
That's Münster. Okay. And that I wanted to show you real quick because Tartary, the name of Tartary is quite interesting. Jules Verne, you might know him. He actually was a Freemason writer, and many people say he was the first science fiction writer. And what he actually did is he wrote a novel that is called the Der Kurier des Zahn. How would you call that? The writer of the Tsar, so somebody who delivers messages for the Tsar.
Messenger of
And
the Tsar. Okay.
exactly. And the story is actually about the Tartars, which in the story they made them just a tribe. The Tartars tribe, the Krim Tartars, exist today, and so they basically said that the Tartars that lived down here somewhere, they interrupted the line and the streets between Moscow and Irkutsk. And now this guy has to write there. He has to try to go to Irkutsk to bring him instructions of the Tsar. And so they tried to make the Tartars not this big country anymore. They tried to make him just one tribe that lived in Asia. And that is one of these narratives, one of these cover-ups in order to write Tartary out of the history books. And another big indication, obviously, is in the Encyclopedia Britannica of the year 1770. There is actually 2 pages of about Tartary, and then in the next version of the encyclopedia, it just vanishes.
Right.
So
That's the thing. If you there's the what's it called? The NL graphs, N graphs on Google, and you can see the usage of books of the terms Tartary. And there's a point where it's more common and all of a sudden just disappears for a while, like it's being completely suppressed, and then it starts to emerge again after the 1960s. But for a long time, it's not that they're pushing it, it's that they're hiding it,
Exactly. This is actually, I don't know why it comes up so crooked, but this up here, this is actually the Encyclopedia Britannica 1770. So here's Tartary. So you see that a large country, blah blah blah, and then in the next version, it's simply missing. And here
you got a super chat from Travis Yeet, which Yeet is American for loose gates, I guess. It's kind of the best connect. Let's go.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about something else that is quite interesting. As we all know, the United States got founded in 1776. So the British colonies were all on the East Coast, and they remained on the East Coast for quite some time. So there was then what they are telling us, what the narrative is, that the United States started to expand in the early 1800s. So they bought Louisiana, then they annexed New Mexico and Texas. So we have the Alamo here and everything. Then also from Mexico in 1848, they received basically California, Arizona from Mexico. And again, from England, from the United Kingdom in 1846, they got Washington and Oregon and Idaho. So this was the westward expansion of the United States. What is quite interesting, and here we're talking about the Western expansion actually started pretty much at the same time as Napoleon marched to Russia. And so if you think about Tartary collapsing somewhere after 1812, they might have been on the North American continent. I think there's very strong indications that they were actually there. So let's put the hypothesis out. Tartary collapsed somewhere after 1812. Now you have this huge vacuum in Asia and in North America, because pretty much at about the same time the United States start to expand westward and Russia starts to expand eastwards. So there must have been something in between that prevented them from doing that. That country collapsed. We believe it's It has been Tartaria. And now you have this expansion filling in that vacuum of power. And so I actually, so here we have the same thing again, the expansion.
And just to briefly mention, it's of course always impossible to exactly attribute these ideas, but also 1848, because just to show the map of expansion, was also when the revolutions in the Austrian Empire happened. And of course, it can be assumed that it spans a few years, but still there's a few dates. I wish it were only 1 year. It's probably not that simple, but yeah, many things happening at the same time. And if one knows there's some global coordination, obviously, it's kind of suspicious.
Can you imagine what it's going to be like in 100 years when someone reads about 2022 and they're like, there's no way all that stuff happened in 1 year.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
There's no correlation. Yeah.
There's no way. In 3 days in a row? Come on.
Exactly. It will be fun. So I found this painting that was actually made by John Gust in 1872. And this is basically the narrative. This is what they teach us, how America got created, right? Back here we have New York. Then they built the railroads across to the west. We have Buffalo Bill here hunting the buffaloes. We're chasing away the Indians. We have the gold rush, right? So, and we have the farmers. And so the United States is moving westwards. So this is how they teach it to us. Interesting little side note, by the way. If you talk about playing cowboys and Indians, in America, the cowboys are always the good guys, right? And the Comanches and the Apaches are the bad guys because they're killing the settlers or try to do that. In Germany, it's the other way around. In Germany, the Indians are the good guys.
Of course.
You know?
Yeah.
So
no, I was going to say, it's like that in California. Don't worry. It's only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Midwesterners, I think, still have like some love for cowboys, but they inundated us both with so much propaganda against cowboys. Don't worry.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I found that quite funny, you know, because I was always Winnetou when I grew up, you know, as the chief of the Apaches, you know, so that's the hero for the German kids. And then I moved to America and was exactly the other way. So.
I was watching the show recently with Brittany, 1881 or 1883. It's like a Paramount show about, like, it's basically Oregon Trail, like going across to Oregon. And there's that video game, Oregon Trail, where you try. It's the same story. You've got Pinkerton detectives trying to help these Germans get across the United States, and immigrants and gypsies with them and everything. And, you know, along the way, they meet good and bad people, Indians and cowboys. But the cowboys, you know, at some point they have to wrangle some cattle. They have some bulls and cows. So they hire some cowboys. And all of a sudden, Brittany looks over at me and she's like, "Wait, oh, is that why they're called cowboys?" And I was like, "Oh, bro," you know, because I think Americans do just look at a lot of times cowboys as being these like sexy, like rock stars that just were called cowboys for no reason, you know. Right.
Exactly.
We got another super chat. Travis says, peasant revolts in Russia. Peasants were the Tartars. At the same time, U.S. expands into the West. Yeah, that's true. There's a synchronicity in time. Same thing happening.
So let's see. So we have the American narrative now. So let's see how it really looks like.
American narrative.
So and let's actually do that on the example of Utah, right? So they are telling us that the settlers went across the United States with carts and horses, right? So the typical.
Have you ever been in one of those wagons? Like the suspension's not good. You know, on a regular road, it's not good. So in a swamp, in a ditch, no good.
It is not fun. Yeah, exactly. And so now they're telling us that they arrived in Utah in 1860, and the first thing they do, starting in 1853, right? They start to build this thing. They start to build the Mormon temple.
Yeah.
They had nothing better to do. They arrived there with the carts. They have basically shovels and pickaxes, and the first thing they do is build this.
And it's as deep as it is tall, which is the other interesting thing. So it's
Exactly. Yeah. So we're talking mud flood here, right?
right.
Exactly. So and I.
But you do have okay. So here's the thing. So Ewan Jr. has been on the show. He loves to talk about the assembly and fabrication of a lot of the Tartary stuff. We have a lot of these pictures, especially the Mormons, showing up at a place that they say used to be somebody, and then it was destroyed, and then they're rebuilding it. So what do you see when you see these pictures? Are they picking up the stones and putting them back together after earthquakes, or are these things just sitting there? What's up with these pictures where it looks like they're disassembled?
I actually believe that the thing was already there, because when you analyze these pictures, and that's an analysis, I think John Levi did that at the time. When you look at that, what really strikes you is that they're building this church always at the same height, right? So, and I actually went through the years here. See that it's like cut here. So they're not trying to build one tower to see if it fits and then take the next one. They just cut it here, right? And this actually looks photoshopped, if you ask me. There's more here. These guys actually look pretty fake. And again, they're always going around and they're always building at the same height. I believe is not realistic at all. And here we have a later stage, the same thing, the same height here, same height back there. So basically, I believe, or here, it looks really, really crazy. It's like cut off, right? It's like cut off, and they put some structures on there, some cranes on there. So here we're getting close to being finished. And this is the finished.
Can you go back to the pictures before this one?
This one?
Yeah, it's interesting. And then are we looking at people or are those trees? What's all that down there? Like that's all,
That's a good question. It's probably from the size, I would say probably people. Yeah.
Man, those would be really tall people, wouldn't they? I mean, I would think.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I don't know what I'm looking at, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Salt Lake City's nuts. I mean, especially you go there now and it's like Disneyland. They've got broken glass in the concrete that makes everything shiny, like glitter, so the streets just glitter like they're paved with gold.
Just to briefly bring this up, because this picture is really strange, it finally seems like those in this building could actually be built for the height of those individuals. Because I always bring this up again and again. Now, if you enter a Tartarian building, you can hardly open the door. It's not made for, 5 or 6 foot individuals. It almost looks like a bad Photoshop then if they leave that in, because that's like a really huge red flag. But yeah, they only took care of the upper part. Yeah, so.
Well, Mormons can tend to be tall, so.
All right.
Exactly. So let's see what else do we have here. This is just some more close-ups where you can clearly see that this is Photoshop. There is no people standing up there that just put them on there, And this is another church. It's pretty much the same up here. You see these people here. They were never there. So all these buildings seem to be much older than the American settlements were. Or here you can clearly see that somebody came in there.
Right.
So. Exactly.
I just saw this movie recently about photographing ferries, and it's about the main character's job is during World War I, when a soldier dies, he cuts the head of the best picture he can find of that soldier into a photo he takes of his friend between the parents of the soldier, so he can make them have one last photo with their son, and he's constantly doing like all of it, and it's amazing because it's like 1910 or whatever, and he shows all of the ways that they could do that. We think that we need digital software. Like they could do this with scissors.
Yeah, exactly. And then another example that is very well known. I mean, John Levi is still doing videos on that. Is actually the World Exhibitions. So this is the Chicago World Exhibition, and they are seriously telling us that all these buildings were made out of wood and paper and glue, basically, and they just built it up for the World Exhibition, and they tore them down again. And the hypothesis obviously is that these buildings were already there. I use the World Exhibition as an excuse to tear them down. I'm telling the people that still knew they were there 100 years before, I'm telling them, well, we need new industry, we tear them down, and then over time, I let the world forget that they ever existed. That seems to me much more realistic than this just being wood. I, I actually doubt that you can build a dome like that just out of wood and paper.
Right.
There's no way, you know.
I went around San Francisco at one point with our friend Ethan Athander, and we found examples of statues, some of the real statues from the San Francisco fair that were turned into garden statues for some of these elite Nancy Pelosi, like multi-million-dollar state houses. So I mean, some of those things did get smuggled off, and there's plenty of stories of people that say, yeah, we worked at the thing and we were supposed to plaster this one little bit to like clean up this area, you know, but a lot of these statues that were brought in, you know, and things that were there and everything, and the only person who was allowed to touch the World's Fair was Helen Keller.
Yeah.
She's blind, and she's the only one to, it's like, ask the blind man, he saw it too, is the old saying.
Crazy, yeah. Here's just some more examples. So the Montana State Capitol, it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? So again, the settlers arrived there, and they have nothing better to do than build something like this. There's not even a town around it, you know. So it's crazy. And then if you look at back in here, you have something. You have this chimney. You have this building stuck in the ground. So that's actually a nice mud flood indication.
And details of underground systems. Yeah, and like, where's the train? You know, they have to have the train go by it at least. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's see, what else do I have? Yeah, there's other state capitals. Obviously, I believe this is the one in Iowa, if I remember right. Star Fort is another thing that you find all across the world. This here is Fort Union, which supposedly is a Civil War fort, so probably much older. Then yes, the Statue of Liberty, of course. This is a city in on the lower right. It's a city in the Netherlands, and this one here, I don't even know where it is. The top right is probably Spain or something like that. But so we find star forts all around the world, and this is quite interesting. Shiprock. I actually looked at that myself back in the day, and so here I have the satellite picture. So here's Shiprock. And here you have a straight wall going almost exactly south, and then you have a slightly bent wall here going to the west. When I saw this picture first here on the top left, that reminded me of Lord of the Rings, the city on the mountain, right? And here you have the walls moving away. So has that been a city? Has that been a castle that was destroyed by whatever, you know, whatever weapon they have available? That's actually another quite interesting theory.
What do you think about the giant trees? Have you heard the theories about silicon trees or giant mushrooms, trees in general? What do you think that's all? What is that?
Oh yeah, I believe it is quite a possibility. I mean, especially when you look at what is it in Wyoming, Devil's Tower.
Mm-hmm.
What convinces me that truly was a tree is the hexagon shape of the fibers, you know, because they're trying to tell us that the volcanoes actually produce a hexagon shape basalt rock. I seriously doubt that, because if you go to Hawaii and you look at what lava looks like when it flows out, and especially when it gets hard, it does not get into a hexagon shape. The hexagon
there are
shape,
different kinds of materials that do make resonant patterns, and it's kind of interesting. Like, you go to Bolivia, for instance, the salt flats all make these giant hexagonal patterns because the salt crystals are hexagonal, so it then makes this resonant pattern, and it's this crazy fractal of a grid of hexagons in every direction. And mushrooms can do some growth too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's, I mean, but the thing is, yeah, it's cuts straight across and sometimes smashed across. And you know, Benevolent Dreams keeps pointing out the Madagascar tree line, which also has overhang. So if there's a tree, a lot of time it has an overhang of branches with leaves and everything. So the area around the tree is also affected. And it seems like that in all of the perimeter radius of these mesas, these stone quote unquote mesas, it looks like there was an area that was shaded by a tree, and that's
Mm.
kind of hard to fake.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, there is actually also not too far from here, about 50 miles from here, the Geroldsberg, that is in the Rhön in Hessen, and there actually you also find that you basically have the basalt rocks that could have been the tree stump. It's not quite as spectacular as Devil's Tower, but close to that. And then you actually have a couple of them going sideways. So that could have been some branches, right? When they cut that thing down, it fell over. And maybe next time I bring some pictures from that, because I was actually there. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah, exactly. I'm actually through. So here I just put some links in. You might know. I'm sure you know most of those. So John Levi, of course, he's doing a
Love
lot.
Levi, and I love Lead K. And
Martin Liedke is great. Knopfloch, he actually translated the Ever Ennen videos into German, or into Switzerland German. So this was by lots of the people that inspired me to do that, or to start to put that out here. Great.
I actually I have kind of a conspiracy theory about Switzerland. I kind of think I should bring up.
Oh, definitely.
What do you think about cuckoo clocks? Let me pull up my things here. So, okay, cuckoo clocks. I mean, this is kind of a cuckoo conspiracy theory.
Okay.
But you go around and you see in Spain, and you see around the world, you see a lot of these water mills, right? Water mills are everywhere. But you also see cuckoo clocks, and cuckoo clocks don't get a lot of press because they sound crazy. And it's like they're trying to sound crazy. Like they want you to think that cuckoo clock, but that really the cuckoo is a crazy bird, and there's a reason why it's named after this bird that's able to do all this stuff. Anyway, you go back to Tartaria, you think of Susong, the father of automata and robotics, right? So in the 10th century, he made these wind-up gear things where it would push a cart up a hill, like just straight up a hill for like a mile, or 2 kilometers, something to that effect, and it would just take the weight of the thing you put on the thing pushing down on these gears like a bicycle, and the gear springs would move this up. And so it all relied on these spring mechanisms that would hold potential energy. So clock jacks. And when you look at some of these clocks, right? So these old clocks in ancient Tartaria that would run for weeks or months or a year without any sort of changes or anything that could set them up. But a lot of the cuckoo clocks, what's interesting about them is that they're tiny. Let me find a good picture. Clock. And nanotechnology has been learning from this, but these are little tiny clocks, and these guys will run for like 8 days off of a spring mechanism. So what's funny is it's made in Switzerland, and it relies on free energy. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Like these guys are working with this old primitive version, albeit maybe, but Rolex isn't primitive, but they've got these different kinds of spring cork mechanisms that are back to that. What's the name of I always mess up the name. The Achamis compass thing. What's it called? The gear. I can never spell it, and I always forget.
Oh, wow.
The Greek ancient gear. What's it called?
Beats me for the moment.
Archimedes gear.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Archimedische Schraube. Yeah.
The Antikythera. There we go. The Antikythera mechanism. There it is. Antikythera mechanism. So you look at the Antikythera mechanism and you see, hey, this is the same. And so people have said, oh, hey, this is a lot like a Rolex. It's got a lot of the same things as a Rolex. It could be used to calculate big logarithmic numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But the other thing it could be used for, besides that, is it could be used for a spring system, and for these spring systems. So it's weird because the same people that are making cuckoo clocks make CERN, and that kind of reminds me of a giant cuckoo clock, really. So in terms of giant energy spirals. But yeah, so the giant clock tower system, they've built these clock tower systems in ancient China, and they made their way across into the Jesuit areas. You can see all the areas in Europe where they have giant clocks as well. But it makes you wonder, like, did they just take those areas, like Munster? Did they just take the cathedral? In Spain and in lots of areas, you can see where a mosque used to be turned into a cathedral, turned back into a mosque, turned back into a cathedral, turned into some military base, turned back into a historical cathedral that tourists can visit, right? So I mean, but yeah, that was all. That's all I had to say about cuckoo clocks, really.
Super. Learn something new again.
I don't know. I just wonder, what do you think about free energy? Do you think there's anything to it, like, or is
Oh,
it?
absolutely. Yeah. There is so many indications that must have been free energy in the past. I mean, that's actually in my other presentation. I could talk about electrical car from 1910, and back in the day that actually drove. I believe it was from Chicago to Norfolk or something like that, without ever stopping. Without ever getting gas or anything. So.
Right.
And
There's
they certainly did not have the Tesla plugins. No,
there's one
charge.
particular connection I'd like you to bring up, Martin, because in one of the presentations, I believe you called the architecture Tartarian Vedic or something like that. You connected it somehow with like Vedic, I don't know, art style or history, because the question with the religious books, I mean, with the Bible, we know there's 100 versions.
Tartarian
Quran maybe
Indo-Aryan.
older. And with other, it's always the question, like, which religious scripts actually are original, or what is the founder culture, or where does what kind of knowledge get transferred to across the ages, and how does it relate? Because I think your presentation was the first time when someone deliberately mentioned this Vedic connection that I was aware of. I'm not sure, Exertus, if you had heard of this idea, let's say.
I mean,
had
so
heard it.
you think noble means Aryan is Sanskrit for noble, right? And so Tartarian, a lot of the time they connect the Tartar and Aryan, the noble Aryan, because so many people for a long time, we think we haven't heard about Tartars, but in parts of Europe, particularly in Russia and Uzbekistan and places, they're disliked, or they have been for centuries. And they've said, okay, well, the Cossacks are okay so long as they work with us, and otherwise they're the filthy Tartar. And so then they say, oh no, but the noble, the noble savage, right? And so if you think about it, the noble savage, noble is Aryan, right? And then Tartar is the savage. So it's a Tartarian in a lot of ways. It ends up meaning that in so many ways. But we've also got people that connected Tartarists, right? So for a lot of Europeans during the time when they thought Jesus was a donkey who flew, and that, St. Christopher was a dog-headed guy, they had a lot of weird stories at that time in the Gnostic, Christian periods, and not even Gnostic, just the periods where before Erasmus, they thought that the Tartars were people from the dead, and they connected it with this idea of it. So it's interesting because we have this idea of it meaning the noble, meaning then the savage, then meaning, the land of the dead. And even in some cases, like if you go to Pakistan, Tartars associated with mud, and there are these fire festivals that Muslims have and Persians have, that in parts of Saudi Arabia and parts of Pakistan, and I think even in Afghanistan, they do a mud ritual instead of the fire ritual where they cover everybody in blood. So there is kind of that cultural origin of mud, flood, and everything else. But in terms of you look at Russian architecture today, you look at their churches, and you see Walt Disney's Agrabah from Aladdin, right? So there's definitely some sort of an Arabic influence. The question, I guess, Raph poses is, and I wonder if you have, seen examples of, are the connections to India, right? India being a place with
Arabic, barbaric, Arabic, barbaric. I mean,
right?
Is it all connected, But
everything
Martin, you want to expand a bit on that, on the Vedic connection, or how you see that relates with whatever information you can share about it.
I did not dive too much into that, but however, so what the Asian and European part of Tartary seem to have been one culture, if you will. I mean, they even talking about that they had the same language, so they could talk to each other, and then probably, I don't know if it was the Jesuits or some earlier people working for the popes. They actually messed up the language, right?
Out
And
of the
they
respect to Elrond, because, you know, he wanted to bring the Jesuits just to show that we don't censor or hide any truth. You know, we're going to point out Matteo Ricci. He was the Jesuit who's known to have written about his accounts in the 1500s. And a lot of anything after him is suspect. Yes. Okay. So yeah,
Mhm.
we're just out of respect
Exactly.
to our fans.
And I find this actually very interesting aspect that we talked about earlier, that the main goal of the sea powers always was to keep Russia and Germany apart. So if you look at the German language and the Russian language, so here they did not only, they literally, they went that far with the twisting of the language that they actually turned the letters around. You know, they have the backwards R, the backwards N. They even created a new language to make sure that these two cannot talk to each other anymore.
Have
They
you seen
cannot.
have you seen the thing with Etruscan? So if you take, you know, the Romans have a July 4th kind of thing, which is their Independence Day, which is called the sacking of Sabines. And it's about the raping of Tarpeia, and it's where
Yes.
they got a bunch of dudes drunk, they took their wives and their daughters and they married them, and then they took over the lands of the Etruscans. And so that's how they got the Etruscan land. But you look at the Latin alphabet and it's exactly mirrored backwards to Etruscan, right? Entirely. It's not just like Cyrillic, which is a little off, it's full on. And when you try to read the thing, it doesn't make sense, except with new computers they've been able to kind of like pick it apart, and it sounds like it's literally backwards, like to the extent of the sounds are being pronounced backwards, like if you had records and you're playing them backwards. And people were being burned at the stake during the time of Charlemagne for trying to be doing the mass backwards, because they thought that it was satanic, that they were doing the masses in reverse, everything backwards, because they thought that their culture had been inverted, right? And you've got people crossing themselves the other direction from each other and everything. It's this entire mirroring of the culture. So
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah. I just had a thought that just slipped away from me again. I will
sorry.
come back a little bit later. That's okay.
I do my tangents, but you were saying that the Russians and the Germans were separated because they shouldn't be working together because they're powerful, and they switched the letters, of Cyrillic to separate them. I mean, maybe also St. Petersburg is interesting because of that, because you've got the actual capital, a very German Russian city, right? It's called St. Petersburg. They didn't really try very hard with that one. They could have made it a Russian name, but no.
That's true. Yeah, architecture-wise, if you, I mean, St. Petersburg is absolutely magnificent. There's probably the biggest and greatest buildings in that area. But if you compare that to Dresden, Dresden in Germany actually also has beautiful architecture, not quite as big, but I personally believe that was one of the reasons why they tried to wipe Dresden out in the last World War.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's go ahead and do it. Let's talk about Dresden. I mean, that's always fun on an American YouTube channel. But hey, it's worth it. I mean, Dresden. So I did an interview with Wendy Shaw, who's the voice of Francine on American Dad, and she was in the Kurt Vonnegut Slaughterhouse-5 movie, which they shot like in Dresden. And she was supposed to go for like a weekend, but because Kurt Vonnegut's crazy, like it took like 6 months or something, and she ended up living in Dresden and in Prague to shoot parts of the movie. But I wonder so much about Dresden because they completely wiped it off the map. Why? Was it just, I mean, it sounds like even from the Western perspective, it was just a trauma. The only excuse they have is to traumatize people by destroying culture. I mean, what did Dresden have that's so incredible? Why is it so, what was it before the war?
I personally, I mean, it was a big trade center, of course, because it's at the river Elbe, which goes all the way up to Hamburg. So, and that's probably why the city became so rich in the geographical region it was in.
Scandinavian Vikings trading with them for millennia.
Yeah, exactly. But I personally think, I mean, you have Tartarian architecture there. They just wanted to wipe it off the world. They did not quite succeed because they built the churches back up, they built the castle back up. But I think they tried to do that. And of course, the second aspect is also to kill lots of people, if you will. There's this big controversy how many people died there. We will never know, I guess, until the archives open. But there is a very infamous saying of Churchill Not sure if you heard about that. So Churchill actually, when his Air Force generals told him, "Yeah, we will attack Dresden and we will attack this factory and we will attack that train station," he actually said, "I'm not interested in how you're wiping out industry. I want you to wipe out the people in the city." It's
Mm.
supposedly he said that. It's kind of hard to prove, but
And the movie Metropolis, right?
yes.
So it's an interesting thing to me. It was like when I was a kid, I was watching, I came into my dad's television room. I was like, "What are you watching?" And it was a black and white sound film. And it was Metropolis. And all of a sudden, during the screen, there was a black screen for a while with some words saying what was going on, but it wasn't being shown. I'm like, "What happened? Where's the scene?" It's like, "Well, it doesn't exist. It's been bombed. During the war, they just destroyed Babelsberg and all these different places and destroyed all the film stocks that they had." But over the years, they found more and more of the movie until I think it was like 2008 or 10 in Argentina. They found the widower of some guy who had been, from Germany, and had a copy of a 16 millimeter print or something of the film, and they were able to clean up to an extent the missing scenes from Metropolis, and they put it out. But it's like the craziest movie because you've got new Tower of Babel. It's this fascist dictatorship where social humanitarianism must prevail. There's robotics, there's Satanism, there's the occult, there's technology. What do you think about this message that was coming? This is what Germany was showing us. Do you think this connects, or is this showing us something about Tartaria? Or
Hard to say. It almost seems to show us something about today, right? So
right?
the transhumanism, fascist system, as you said, yeah. Then of course all these enslaved people, the slave work and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Man.
I never thought about it in connection with Tartaria, to be honest. But interesting thought.
Yeah, I kind of wonder because it's supposed to be, you think of it as the future, but it could be almost the past in a sense already, because it seems like it's already the peak of their civilization, but it's a parallel civilization. I
Yeah.
mean, it's an interesting one. I definitely wonder about the messages of Metropolis because it was obviously not something that the government of Germany really liked. Like Fritz Lang had to leave Germany, so it wasn't hyper acceptable. But he also broke up with his girlfriend who wrote it because she was more trying to be in line with the government. I mean, I have a weird theory about the film. There's the son Frieder, right? So Frieder, he looks so much like, he doesn't really look like his father, right? So this is supposed to be his father right here, the guy who's been having a fight with this guy who looks like Friederson more. Frieder does not look like him. Friederson looks more like the Dr. Votfang, and the guy who made the robot based on Hell, his mother, right? So Hell, also Hellenism, that idea of Hellenism and brightness, and the antithesis of Hell, the way we think of Christian Hell, because it's the Greco-Roman Hell. And I think the deal is because they both had the affair with his wife, that really the son is the bastard of the inventor, not of the owner of the town. I think that's partially what they're trying to say. He's more of the merit foundling.
Well, I definitely have to watch that movie again. I saw it maybe like 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, now that they finally have the full thing out, because I think in the last 10 years they've got the whole version of it. So there was all these scenes missing, like the Yoshiwara district was cut out completely, where he goes to the entertainment district, because there's like women dancing, and that wasn't okay when they brought the scenes over. And a lot of the interaction with the robot were cut because the American editor said he couldn't imagine a more cold bedfellow than a rusty automaton or something. So they weren't able to really like process it at the time. But I feel like we're now finally at the point where all of these pinnacle sci-fi things are ubiquitous in our society. Anything that was talked about, atomic energy, 3D printing, all these things, they're very real now. There's no metaphor to any of the technology anymore.
Yeah, very true.
Well, I appreciate that you took the time to come, man. I think we should do another talk soon. Like this is pretty
Oh,
good.
absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
I love that presentation, and there's definitely more we can do looking into Antiquitech. I think that would be so. You have your next one's on Antiquitech.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah,
So
just
Martin, where? Oh yeah,
to
go ahead.
bring
Raf.
that up briefly, because you mentioned that it seems it's also real, all the science fiction. But again, this is the question: what kind of new progressivist future
Right.
did they envision for us 100 years ago? Because the next layer to 3D printing, I just recently heard again, and it's kind of, anyone can make of it what they will, but think of Star Trek replicators. Everything is frequency ultimately. So obviously there's higher levels still to even the great 3D printer, so
Femto
always
printing
about
is
the
the famous
narratives and what timeline of progress do they want you to think you're locked into, when actually they probably stole the real fantastic one in a sense. This what it seems like, right?
So there's nanotech to nanoprinting, which would be like you molecular printing, and that's a lot of the time the Star Trek thing where you can print into food and into replicator. You can maybe even replicate life with a molecular printer, but who knows if it has soul or anything else like that. So beyond nano is that subatomic particle thing CERN's so interested in pentaquarks, the idea of combining quark and molecular structure. That's femtoprinting and femtoprinting. So with a femtoprinter, you could arrange matter and not just do it for you, but you could do it for your whole environment. And you could actually arrange an entire space-time. Like to be exact, you could copy this moment and then print this moment essentially using all the molecular structure. That's what they're aiming towards, right? Last thing I want to bother you with. Have you seen the Godard Tunnel theatrical video, right?
When they opened it with his demons and everything.
Right. I just want to make, because Americans probably didn't pay too much attention to this. Darth Call brought this up, and I thought it was really important that people check this out. So near Stern and Godard base tunnel in Switzerland, not too near, it's like a little bit further south, but they did have a connection to it. They had this art show, and it's in order to open this tunnel, they brought out these guys. And they started it with kind of a metropolis. It's not quite metropolis, but they have people walked up that were like workers that slowly walked up. And then they have these weird angel dance moves. And all of a sudden comes out of this weird, atomic monster.
Yeah.
And then angels that have breasts and wings and priests and nuns. And I mean, this is nuts. I don't know. So does this have any relevance, you think, though, like to Tartaria or to the aesthetic of the occult exclusively? Like, what are they trying to tell us?
To the occult. I mean, so you have Baphomet in there, right? So talking about the horns and the breast and things like that. So you definitely have Baphomet there. You had him there a little bit earlier. Yeah. I think this is deep state occult, 100%.
What are they? Are they literally just telling us they're about to open a portal to hell?
That's certainly what they would want us to believe.
It sure looks like it. It looks like it at times. Yeah, it truly looks like it.
Well, all right, Martin. Where can they find more of your stuff? By the way, if we were to look for you,
we have the Raffael actually posted those 3 links.
Right, that's true. Okay,
yes.
Maybe you can then make it available.
Martin has yet, but there's this blog post on my website where you can at least see the German presentation. So anyone listening, wanting to listen to this in German, it's all available. And we certainly hope there'll be more, Martin. Thank you very much.
I love this idea of Mind Unveiled's been doing the language translation. We're going to have to do some exotification of Deutschland. So let's make it happen. Awesome,
absolutely. Man. We'll do that. Raphael and I team up and we will get you transferred into German. No problem.
That's the best, because you guys have the great voices. It's not enough to have a German robot. I know that seems weird to say, but it's the humanity of German that I like.
Okay, great.
I love you guys. We'll see you soon.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Please.
Take care.
Check out his links below, guys. Peace.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarian.